Chinese people clearly had something to say about the legalization of gay marriage in England and Wales last weekend. British Prime Minister David Cameron said the reform was necessary because, and this is a quote from the Telegraph, "When people's love is divided by law, it is the law that needs to change." He wrote on Pink News that this weekend is an important moment for our country because we will, at last, have equal marriage in our country. Just like the hot discussion over the U.S. Supreme Court's decision last year granting married gay and lesbian couples the same benefits as heterosexual couples, it's an issue which Chinese people have been discussing for some time as well, with passionate debaters on both sides. Among the more prominent supporters of legalizing gay marriage in China is sexologist Yin-he. Over the years, she has proposed amendments to China's marriage law, but has been rejected. On the flip side, opponents of gay marriage say China is different from Western countries. So, what do Chinese internet users feel about the current situation? And just how far is China from seeing same-sex marriages legalized? To find out, let's join our researcher, Julia Liu, in the newsroom. Hi, Julia. How are Chinese net users reacting to the legalization of gay marriage in England and Wales? Do they support it?
Hi, Scott. From the comments I've seen, many are quite happy with the result. Fei Mao says on QQ.com, "I feel excited when seeing these couples having their wedding ceremonies. They finally have the legal right to call each other husband and wife. That's just so sweet." Well, now there are some who didn't see this coming. Well, Shi Er has this to say. Well, last year I saw some reports about the UK's hesitation about the legalization of same-sex marriage for fear that it would challenge their dominating position in Europe if it influences other European countries' positioning on this same issue. Honestly, I didn't see this decision coming so suddenly. Well, we do need to clarify here, though, that this particular law only applies to England and Wales. Well, Scotland has a separate law coming into place later on, but Northern Ireland hasn't announced anything similar. Well, going back to the comments now, and they're having quite a few tongue-in-cheek remarks, actually. Liang Ke Sansan says on Weibo.com, "Well, the first married gay couple in the UK are just so handsome. Is it a setup by the government to leave a good impression for the public?" And interestingly, there are quite a number of net users that mention some couples in British TV series. Well, as we've covered on China's Sake before, there are quite a few fans in China that's intent on finding a gay subtext to any relationship between members of the same sex in television. For example, Zhang Lirong apparently has her favorite choice. So does that mean I can finally witness the marriage of Holmes and Watson in Sherlock?
Well, that one might be tricky. Watson already married Mary at the end of last season. But it does seem that internet users in China are fortunately rather open-minded towards same-sex marriage being legalized in England and Wales. Is it the same when it comes to the issue in China? Do they feel there's a move towards more tolerance and less prejudice in China?
Well, that's hard to say. I mean, in purely social terms, China has certainly seen progress, and at least in bigger cities and among younger people, while same-sex couples are more accepted than, say, 10 years ago. Well, actually, Yin-he, the sexologist you mentioned at the top of the segment, well, she has done some research which shows that Chinese people have an even higher tolerance for homosexuals when it comes to the question of whether they should share the same job opportunities as heterosexuals. Well, Lin Bi Mego has this to say on Zhihu.com. Well, the religious belief plays a big role among the opponents of homosexuality in Western countries. But in China, we don't have any influence from that aspect, which makes people more likely to accept it. Well, however, I have to say that there are still some rigid opinions on the other side of the argument. For example, Ling Ziyu says on Tianyadao.cn, "For many people, it's one thing to talk about their tolerance for this group of people, and another thing when it really comes to people around them. Well, there are still strong traditional cultural influences among the Chinese, and that is a shame for the family if there's no offspring." And this was a shrimp has a similar take. From my observation, most Chinese people's attitude toward this issue is that it's none of my business. But if it really is their business, like finding out that their own kids are gay, most parents would still oppose it.
Okay, in the further issue of same-sex marriage, what's the reaction to that? What in the eyes of internet users are the obstacles for China to legalize it?
Well, besides the cultural influence, which many net users mentioned just now, there are several reasons why they think it will still be quite a long until China legalizes a same-sex marriage. Well, COA thinks it has to do with the priority of the government's work. And he says, firstly, I think the common concern about this issue in China is much less than that in Western countries. And there's much more to be done for our government right now. The inequality of wealth, the corruption among officials, the education problem, and the sovereignty disputes, and so on. Well, I personally think that the government simply doesn't have the time for this issue yet. And Wu Tong Zhixia on Zhihu.com thinks that there's more to be prepared before the legalization. And he says, in countries that have legalized the same-sex marriage, there have already been some laws concerning this group of people before the legalization occurred. Well, right now in China, even the rape of men does not come under criminal law. There's still much to be done. And Liu Ke has this to say, also on Zhihu.com. Well, as a gay person myself, I have to say the gay community in China is rather weak. With the restriction of the traditional way of thinking, not many of us have the courage to organize some campaigns to protect our rights. Well, right now there are only some small groups with some young people. You can hardly see protests or campaigns. I honestly think that there's much that can be done by us, by the government, and by everybody else.
Thanks, Julia. And that was China Take researcher Julia Liu with a look at people's thoughts on the possibility of gay marriage being accepted in China. Next up on China Take, some of the top trending phrases on China's most popular search engines.